Talent is a remarkably dangerous thing in the wrong hands. We are taught from a very young age to show our absolute best work, to raise our hands highest in the classroom, to bring home the gold star. We fundamentally believe that merit is the ultimate, universally accepted currency. But in the real world, the one operating behind closed boardroom doors and slick, passive-aggressive corporate emails, radiating too much brilliance can actually get you killed, professionally speaking, of course. You see, we operate under the massive collective delusion that competence is always rewarded and celebrated by our superiors. It is not. Competence, when displayed without strategic restraint, is a direct, terrifying threat to the most fragile organism on the planet, the human ego. Let us travel back to the year 1661, France. King Louis XIV is firmly on the throne, a monarch famously known as the Sun King. At the height of his spectacular reign, his finance minister, a brilliantly capable, charming, and utterly indispensable man named Nicolas Fouquet, decided to throw a party. Now, this was not just any casual gathering of nobles. Fouquet deeply wanted to honor his king, to vividly show his unyielding loyalty, and, let us be completely honest with human nature here, to subtly showcase his own impeccable taste and his immense, jaw-dropping wealth. He spent an absolute fortune building a magnificent, sprawling chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte. He actively hired the greatest architects, the finest landscape artists, the most celebrated chefs in all of Europe, sparing absolutely no expense for this one night. The night of the party was an undeniable masterpiece. There were dazzling fireworks lighting up the dark French sky, a lavish 7-course dinner that defied imagination, a brand new play premiered by the legendary Molière himself. It was, by all historical accounts, the most spectacular, awe-inspiring evening the world had ever seen. Fouquet, walking through those beautifully manicured gardens, greeting his guests, probably felt a rush of absolute, intoxicating triumph. He had given his beloved master the ultimate gift. He had clearly proven his immense worth, his undeniable power, his absolute value to the crown of France. But he made a fatal, utterly irreversible miscalculation. He forgot to look closely at the king's eyes. If Fouquet had paid closer attention to the micro-expressions of his master, he would not have seen gratitude or joy in the eyes of Louis XIV. He would have seen a cold, creeping, venomous darkness. He would have seen the raw, biological manifestation of primal fear. You see, the king was the sun, and Fouquet had just built a glowing, vibrant galaxy that burned significantly brighter. Louis did not feel honored by this display. He felt deeply diminished. He felt outshone, outclassed, and entirely replaced. The very next day, the brilliant, fiercely loyal, impossibly wealthy Nicolas Fouquet was abruptly arrested. Not for treason in the traditional, violent sense, but for the unforgivable, silent crime of making his master feel deeply insecure. He spent the rest of his natural life, his entire remaining existence, locked away in a dark, solitary prison cell. Now, let us step directly into the psychological mirror. Have you ever felt this specific, suffocating tension in your own life? Think back to a defining moment in your career. You worked tirelessly through the weekends, you relentlessly crunched the complex data, you built the absolute perfect, foolproof presentation. You walked into that freezing meeting room or logged onto that high-stakes, multi-department Zoom call, and you delivered a flawless, devastatingly effective pitch. You solved the exact problem that had been aggressively plaguing your department for 6 long months. The clients were enthusiastically nodding, the team was visibly impressed, the numbers made perfect sense, but your manager, your direct manager, was unusually, uncomfortably quiet. Did you notice their subtle body language in that very moment? The slight, almost imperceptible tightening of the jaw, the defensive crossing of the arms, the sudden, chilling shift in their tone when they finally spoke and said, "Well, let us not get ahead of ourselves here. You genuinely thought you were being Fouquet, throwing a brilliant intellectual party to help the entire company thrive. But your manager experienced that exact same moment entirely differently. They experienced it exactly as King Louis did. Daniel Kahneman, the brilliantly perceptive behavioral economist, taught us a great deal about cognitive biases and how our brains deceive us. When you unexpectedly outshine the master, you are not just presenting good data, you are violently triggering a primal, ancient alarm system deep within their amygdala. Leaders, especially middle managers fighting for survival in the modern corporate jungle, heavily construct their fragile identity around being the smartest, most capable person in the room. They view themselves as the provider, the ultimate, unquestionable authority. When you effortlessly, publicly solve a problem they could not, you do not just provide a helpful solution. You create a massive cognitive dissonance in their mind. Their brain literally cannot reconcile their deeply held, perceived superiority with your undeniable, flashing actual brilliance. This psychological shock immediately triggers a profound, unshakable confirmation bias. From that exact moment onward, they will never again see your talent as a valuable asset to the collective team. They will unconsciously, obsessively look for every minor flaw, every single missed email, every slight misstep you make, just to confirm their newly formed, paranoid internal narrative. The narrative that you are a direct threat, that you are dangerous, that you need to be swiftly put back in your proper subordinate place. We currently live in the relentless era of LinkedIn humble brags and carefully orchestrated digital power plays. You might honestly think you are just casually sharing a major win on social media, tagging your whole team, showing off that shiny, well-deserved new award to your network. But if you have not carefully, surgically curated exactly how your boss is positioned in that public narrative, you are blindly walking into a lethal trap. Let us carefully look at the complex dynamics of the CC line in a seemingly normal email. It seems so harmless, so purely logistical, right? You CC the VP on a project you just nailed, casually skipping the direct chain of command because, well, you simply want visibility. You want the credit you undeniably deserve for your hard work. What if you did the exact counterintuitive opposite? What if, instead of greedily claiming the blinding spotlight, you strategically, deliberately redirected the beam, the predator, the insecure, hyper-vigilant boss, is constantly, tirelessly scanning the office environment for threats to their authority. They view the workplace not as a warm, collaborative ecosystem, but as a ruthless, zero-sum hierarchy. Every single ounce of praise you get is, in their twisted, fearful perception, an ounce directly stolen from their own pocket. They are silently thinking, if the executive board sees how incredibly good this kid is, why do they even need me around anymore? The prey, the naive, deeply ambitious employee, thinks, if I just work harder, if I just show them exactly how brilliant and dedicated I am, I will inevitably get promoted and rewarded. This is a fatal, tragic mismatch in reality. The employee is naively playing a straightforward game of merit. The manager is playing a desperate, high-stakes game of survival. Let us forensically dissect the micro-expressions of a severely threatened superior. You present a truly groundbreaking, innovative idea. They do not attack the idea directly, because that would make them look petty and small. Instead, they cleverly use the invisible weapon of bureaucratic delay. They politely say, interesting concept, but let us carefully table it for Q3 to review the budget. Or they subtly, masterfully reframe your individual achievement as a vague collective effort, saying, yes, the team really pulled together nicely on this one. I am so glad I pointed us in this general direction last month. That is simply the fragile ego frantically trying to bandage a bleeding wound. The true strategic storyteller, the modern corporate Machiavelli, does not fight this overwhelming current. They expertly use it. You must deeply understand that your master's insecurities are absolutely not a barrier to your eventual success. They are the very levers of your absolute power. If you know that their deepest, most desperate psychological need is to always feel superior, to always feel like the blinding sun, you can engineer complex situations that feed that exact, comforting illusion. You must become the moon. You reflect their light, but you never, ever generate your own blinding, independent flare. When you are sitting in that tense boardroom and you suddenly have the brilliant, undeniable answer, You do not just eagerly blurt it out to claim the fleeting glory. You set the stage. You ask the master a leading, carefully constructed question. A question so perfectly designed that they inevitably stumble upon your brilliant idea and loudly claim it as their very own. You let them fully experience the intoxicating dopamine hit of the aha moment. You nod respectfully, perhaps even taking a diligent note to stroke their ego. You might be angrily thinking right now, but that is simply not fair. I did all the heavy lifting. I did the actual work. Listen to me closely. Fairness is a sweet, comforting illusion sold exclusively to the powerless. Real power is about coldly recognizing the chessboard exactly as it is, not as it ideally should be. The exact moment you make the master appear significantly more brilliant than they actually are, you become totally indispensable. You are no longer perceived as a threat. You are their greatest, most guarded, secret asset. They will inevitably promote you, not because they genuinely admire your raw skills, but because they are physically addicted to the way you constantly make them feel. But there is a very delicate, highly dangerous art to this submission. If you are too obvious, if you aggressively flatter them with clumsy, transparent, over-the-top praise, their paranoid brain will instantly sense your manipulation. The human brain is highly, evolutionarily attuned to deceit. The surrender must look perfectly authentic. The warm light you reflect must seem entirely natural. Consider a completely different, alternate path. What if Nicolas Fouquet had thrown that lavish, spectacular party, but instead of taking the glory, he had raised his glass and boldly declared that every ounce of the beauty surrounding them was merely a pale reflection of his magnificent king's eternal glory? What if he had attributed the architectural genius of the chateau to the inspiration he drew from Louis himself? He would have survived. He would have thrived. The king would have felt immensely validated, a brilliant, glowing sun nurturing his loyal, talented subjects. Instead, Fouquet chose the thrill of personal validation, and it cost him his freedom, his wealth, his entire life. Let us deeply analyze this exact dynamic in the landscape of modern social media. You might assume that having a massive Twitter following or a viral LinkedIn presence makes you incredibly valuable to your current employer. You are building the brand, right? Wrong. If your personal digital brand begins to eclipse the corporate brand of your CEO, or if your thought leadership posts regularly get 10 times the engagement of your direct manager's posts, you are walking through a minefield with a lit match. You are actively triggering their insecurity on a massive public scale. Every single like, every single retweet you get is a tiny dagger to their fragile ego. They will not openly fire you for being popular online, of course. That would expose their petty jealousy to the HR department. Instead, they will slowly isolate you. They will suddenly decide that your current role requires more internal focus, effectively cutting you off from public-facing client meetings. They will weaponize your online success, telling the board you are clearly too distracted by your personal influencer aspirations to handle serious corporate responsibilities. This is the lethal cost of radiating too much unmanaged light. So, how do you engineer the illusion of dependence? How do you make the master feel entirely secure while you quietly build your own actual power base? You have to master the counterintuitive art of selective incompetence. Yes, you heard me correctly. You must occasionally make minor mistakes. This is not about ruining the project or costing the company real money. It is about deliberately leaving a small gap in your armor, a tiny flaw that your manager can proudly fix for you. When you submit that massive quarterly report, intentionally leave out one easily correctable data point. Let them find it. Let them call you into their office, put their feet up, and sagely advise you on the critical importance of rigorous attention to detail. You must look them directly in the eyes, nod with profound gratitude, and say, "Thank you. I completely missed that. Your experience is truly invaluable to me." In that specific engineered moment, you are not actually making a mistake. You are making a highly calculated emotional deposit into their depleted ego account. You are giving them the psychological gift of superiority. Kahneman would note that you are feeding their cognitive illusion of control. You are providing the exact, specific evidence their brain desperately craves to confirm their leadership status. and in return, they will fiercely protect you. They will champion your promotions behind closed doors, not because you are perfect, but because your carefully orchestrated imperfection makes them feel utterly essential. Let us pivot and look at this from the perspective of the predator. If you are the boss, how do you know if your talented subordinate is a Fouquet ready to blind you or a strategic player manipulating your ego? The truly dangerous subordinate is the one who never asks for your help, the one who flawlessly executes every single task, perfectly anticipates every single problem, and operates with a smooth, terrifying independence. This person is not your loyal servant. They are your inevitable replacement. Their absolute, undeniable competence is a silent, ticking time bomb sitting directly under your expensive ergonomic chair. You will instinctively feel a cold dread whenever they enter the room, a biological response to an apex predator entering your established territory. Your brain will immediately start looking for reasons to diminish them, to put them firmly back in their box, because your own professional survival depends on maintaining the strict, unspoken hierarchy of competence. But if we flip the script, if you are the ambitious employee, the aspiring shark in this corporate ocean, you must constantly, vigilantly monitor your own output. You must ask yourself every single day, am I shining too brightly today? Did I just solve that complex technical issue a little too quickly, a little too effortlessly in front of the senior vice president? If the answer is yes, you need to drastically dial it back. You need to deploy the strategic shadow. Imagine closing the biggest, most lucrative sales deal in the entire history of your regional branch. The overwhelming human urge is to sprint into the office, ring the brass bell, pop the champagne, and loudly claim your absolute genius. Resist this primal urge with every fiber of your being. Instead, you walk quietly into your manager's office, close the door, and say, "We got them. But I honestly could not have pushed it over the finish line without that crucial strategic advice you gave me last Tuesday." You have transferred the dangerous heat of the spotlight off your back and placed it safely onto theirs. You kept the massive commission, you secured the actual, tangible victory, but you generously gave away the cheap, fleeting emotional credit. That is the true, hidden essence of power. It is not about who gets their name printed on the glossy corporate newsletter. It is entirely about who silently, invisibly controls the underlying mechanics of the relationship. But there is a very specific, incredibly dangerous moment when playing this game. A moment where the mask slips and the master realizes they have been played. You see, the ego is fragile, but it is also incredibly perceptive when it feels aggressively patronized. If you suddenly transform into a mindless, nodding robot who agrees with every single terrible idea your manager pitches, you trigger a completely different psychological alarm. The predator brain does not just scan for threats, it also ruthlessly scans for weakness. If you appear too weak, too utterly dependent, you are no longer a valuable asset to be protected. You become dead weight. You become a liability that they will eventually discard when the corporate winter comes. This is the ultimate razor-thin tightrope of the first law of power. You cannot be the blinding sun, but you absolutely cannot be a black hole either. You must be a strategically positioned mirror. You have to actively demonstrate your supreme competence, your sharp intellect, and your undeniable value, but always frame it as a direct extension of their leadership. Let us look directly into the psychological mirror one last time. Have you ever tried to flatter someone, perhaps a senior executive, and you saw them physically pull back? You saw their eyes narrow, their smile freeze, and you instantly knew you pushed it too far. That is because their ego, while desperate for validation, also violently rejects obvious manipulation. When the flattery is cheap, it insults their intelligence. Kahneman would remind us that the brain's System 1, the fast, intuitive, emotional processor, is incredibly good at detecting insincerity. So, how do you walk this impossible line in the modern, ultra-competitive corporate jungle? You practice the high art of inception. You plant the seed of your brilliant idea so deep within the soil of your manager's mind that when it finally blooms, they genuinely, deeply believe they planted it themselves. Imagine you are a brilliant data analyst and you have discovered a massive, glaring flaw in the company's entire marketing strategy. The amateur move, the Fouquet move, is to build a massive 50-slide presentation, invite the entire department, and violently tear the old strategy apart to prove your own absolute genius. You will be silently marginalized or outright fired within a month. Instead, you casually walk by your manager's desk with a single, confusing chart. You look slightly puzzled. You say, "I was running those routine numbers you asked for last week, and I noticed this weird anomaly in the customer acquisition cost. It kind of looks like we are bleeding money in the European market, but I cannot quite figure out why. What do you think?" You just handed them a puzzle. You handed them a golden opportunity to be the hero, to be the ultimate saving problem solver. They will stare at that chart. They will eagerly connect the dots that you deliberately, carefully laid out for them. And when they finally slam their hand on the desk and shout the exact solution you knew 3 weeks ago, you look at them with wide, genuine admiration. You say, "Wow, I did not even see it from that angle. That is exactly why you sit in the big chair." You did not just survive, you conquered. You successfully transferred the dangerous, volatile energy of your own innovation through the safe, insulated conduit of your master's ego. They will proudly present the new strategy to the board. They will happily absorb the applause. But they will know, deep down in their primitive, hierarchical brain, that they absolutely need you in their corner to keep finding those specific anomalies. You quietly become the indispensable shadow. Let us consider the predator once more. The insecure boss lives in a constant, suffocating state of low-grade anxiety. They are terrified of the demanding board, terrified of the shifting market, and terrified of you. When you master this law, you actively remove their deepest anxiety. You become the emotional anchor in their chaotic, terrifying world. And humans, regardless of their impressive title or their massive salary, will relentlessly protect the people who make them feel safe and powerful. But remember, this is not about permanently losing your soul or entirely crushing your own burning ambition. This is a strictly temporary, highly tactical deployment of strategic empathy. You are essentially studying the master, mapping the deep, hidden topography of their individual insecurities, and navigating smoothly around them to get exactly what you want. You are playing a long, quiet, brilliant game of chess while everyone else is aggressively, foolishly playing checkers. You are actively collecting the actual power, the quiet influence, the deep institutional knowledge, while generously giving away the empty, meaningless calories of public credit. Because when the time inevitably comes for you to step fully into the light, when you finally move into the master's chair, you will not make the exact same fatal mistakes. You will know exactly how to manage the brilliant, dangerous stars shining below you, because you used to be the brightest one deliberately hiding in the dark. You have the strategic playbook now, you understand the hidden currents of the human ego, and if you want to keep exploring these dark, fascinating waters with me, just hit subscribe and let us plan our next move together.